Hello, this is the Full-Time Devils. I'm Pien Meulensteen and I am joined today by Rene Meulensteen, and you might have guessed we have the same surname. This is my dad. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Pien.
Thanks for joining me today.
Can't wait.
So we're going to have a little chat about United. Obviously, this is the Full-Time Devils, all about United. Let's just start off sort of at the beginning, before I came into your life. What sort of made you want to get into football? I've heard stories of you telling me you worked in a bakery, in a factory. Sort of tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I grew up in a very tiny village in Holland. I think maybe 1,700 people. Everybody knows everybody, but they did have their own football club. So as soon as I could walk, probably, I had a ball on my feet. I think you could only join the club when you were 9, but I was able to join it when I was 7. I can still remember the coach that sort of gave me the first shirt. I'm still going back to the village to visit him at times. So then I started into the youth system and I went through. We were fortunate because with the friends that I grew up with, we had actually a quite good bunch of players for that level, for the tiny village that we had. Although scouting at that time was not in the same way and intensive way as it is now. I do think that quite a few players could have actually played at a higher level. So I went through the youth system at that club, but then I thought I would like to play a bit higher at a higher level. So I went to another, sort of amateur club that played at a higher level. Eventually I ended up playing for NEC Nijmegen, mainly in the reserves because I could combine it with some sports study that I was able to do. As you mentioned before, I did work with my uncle in the factory because I always wanted to do the sports academy, but it was difficult to get a place on that. And through basically a back way, I got on the CIOS, which is the Central Institute of Sports, when I was, I think, 27 at the time. So and from there on, I worked with some of the youth teams at NEC. I played in the reserves at that time, and after that, I went to Qatar.
So you're the youngest out of 7 in your family. How does sort of someone from Bergen, our small village in Holland, decide that they want to be a football coach? Young players have got dreams of becoming professional, but you sort of took that and thought, no, I'm going to be a coach.
Well, I obviously wanted to be the best player I could be, and eventually ended up by playing for a club as well that played sort of in a national league just under the professional level, which was a really good club. We won the national league, etc. So that was great. But coaching really appealed to me at a very young age. I was 16 years old at the club at the village where I grew up. And I was actually coaching 8, 9-year-olds, already when I was 16. And that's when my coaching career started. And it basically kick-started even more when I was in a next door village. And I walked past the bookstore and there was this book displayed called The Plan for the Ideal Footballer, written by Will Curver. And maybe the people that are really well into football, they understand Curver method. And he was the founder of it. So I went inside, took the book, read the preface, and I thought, you don't need to go into university to understand what he means. And I really bought into that. And eventually I thought it would be absolutely fantastic if I could spend some time working with him. And whilst I was, at the CIOS in Arnhem, I tried to establish a link with Curver, which I managed to do through certain people that I got to know along the way. And then in '93, I joined up with him to work with him in Qatar.
Mm. And then obviously you had sort of that influential figure in your life. Do you think that's important for anyone that sort of wants to go into coaching, is sort of thinking of the way now Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has obviously had Sir Alex Ferguson to look up to? Is that sort of an important thing? Is that sort of what was driving you to be the best coach you could be as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think it definitely helps. And I think for every young, inspiring coach, I think it's very important to devise your own philosophy and visions. You have to be true to yourself. I mean, a lot of coaching courses anywhere in the world, you go to those courses and those people really tell what they've come up with. But whether that is the right thing, I don't know. I've always was quietly critical because I felt that what I've read in Will Curver's book made by far more sense than basically the Dutch Association was telling me. But there's more people that have inspired me. Will Curver was definitely one of them because he basically taught me how to develop young technical, skillful players. That was the way to work with young players and bring them up through the different ages and stages. The other one that I got really inspired by was initially as a player, Johan Cruyff, and later as a manager when he was manager of Barcelona and Ajax, the way that he wanted the teams to play. Expansive, attacking, attractive football. So I always felt myself, if I can combine the two, use Curver's philosophy to develop players and use Johan Cruyff's philosophy to how to play, you've got a winning formula.
And then obviously you moved to Qatar with Mum, and then we were brought up in Qatar for 4 years. I lived there for 4 years. Between Qatar and then moving to England, what was so influential for you that made you think I can get a job at United?
I never really thought, to be fairly honest, to get a job. I mean, if I would have told any of my friends, listen, over so many years I'm going to be working for United, it probably would be put me in the asylum, to be fairly honest. But over the time when I was in Qatar, I did my coaching courses in Holland, but I knew it was going to be very difficult to eventually do the pro license because I never played professional football for a long, long period of time. It was more sort of semi-professional. There was a lot of politics involved, and I decided to go through the English FA as well to make sure that I had sort of 2 tracks, and when it came to eventually doing the pro license, then I hopefully get one of the 2. And eventually it was through the English FA that I got to do it in 2005, which was great. But I met some great people along the way, and one of them was Dave Richardson, who was involved with the FA and very much involved when Howard Wilkinson established all the academies to make sure that all those academies were run within the right way, with the right personnel and people. But they saw the deficiency that there wasn't really that skill development going on. And I got to know Dave, and obviously Dave sort of, he knew a lot of people. And at one point, I think it was Les Kershaw, the academy manager at the time at Manchester United, that reached out to him and say, listen, we are looking for such and such, a person that can teach kids, the skills and et cetera, et cetera. Do you know anybody? So Dave basically brought me in contact with Les, and another important person that helped me basically get the job at United was Dave Mackay. You probably maybe still remember him, but you were very young at the time. But Dave was this legendary player from Scotland and Spurs, and he was our next door neighbour. And I've worked a little bit for him, and he got in touch with Ferguson and said, listen, I know that your club is looking at, at a person, at a coach that I know very well. And he recommended me basically. So I knew later on that Sir Alex Ferguson rated Dave Mackay really, really highly. So it all helped, when it all triggered. And then suddenly, you find yourself talking to Sir Alex Ferguson on the phone, and you're flying over, and before you know it, you got a job.
And what was that like, talking to Sir Alex on the phone?
It was great because I just came back from the UK and I spent some time with Dave Mackay basically discussing this. But Dave was a little bit of a joker, you know what I mean? You never know whether you could take it seriously. So he rang me up in October, I think it was, and he said, hi Rene, it's Dave here. Has Sir Alex Ferguson rang you? And I started laughing. He says, no, but I've just hung up on Prince Charles, you know what I mean? He says, no, I've just been talking to him. He should be ringing you. He says, well, but have you given him the right number? Because obviously the numbers in Qatar have changed. They added, I think a 5 it was. That must be it. Anyway, 10 minutes later, Sir Alex Ferguson rang me, and that was strange, but we had a good conversation for about 20 minutes. And then we decided for me to fly over in January and meet him in person, and everything, happened from there.
Nearly missed Mella's birth.
Yes. Well, that was something different, but that was when I was with the Qatari national team, and we were invited for the Nordic Cup with England, and I was going to the old Wembley to watch England play just to get an idea. And it basically was a race against the clock, but I just made it really, really at the end.
Just made it. Right. So this is the start of your sort of United career then. You're coming into work for the youth team. So you had players like Marcus Rashford, Jesse Lingard. Did you sort of think when you were training these young players that they were going to be such a big influential part of the United squad now?
It's always difficult to say, but what I walked into was Jesse was part of the under-9 group when I came in. So was Ravel Morrison, so was Lionel Cole, Ryan Tunnicliffe, Saki Fryers, all people that well known about United know those players. And it says a lot that only Jesse basically has made the cut. Marcus came later in that sequence. But what I found at the time was that at that time, United was still restricted in finding boys within an hour and a half. Now, luckily, that rule has been amended. But it made it difficult because you had so many other clubs, big clubs in the region, fishing in the same pond. What we needed to do was to sort of streamline everything that was happening in those development centres. We then created, some advanced centres, so we draft fit, the better players in there. And that was a good process, but all the coaches and all the people involved were working, and singing from the same hymn sheet, doing the same things, all focused on skill development. It was all about making those kids as skillful as possible, small-sided games, 1v1s, up to 4v4s. And it was great. And there was heaps of good young kids coming through, heaps of them. The fact that those players have made it, sometimes you need a little bit of luck along the way. With Jesse, he's done his fair share of some loan deals away from the club, but he came back and, eventually got the chance to play in the first team. And like I said, I've always felt that Jesse had a good chance of making it because to be a successful top player, you need a few things. You need a quick brain, you need a big heart, and you need quick feet. And that is what I find, Jesse all had. And the same with Marcus, So it's great to see those young players coming through and do so well.
And then obviously you moved to the reserves, managed the reserves. You had players like PK under your name. What was that sort of like managing a team that was as big as United and sort of having first team players as well come and play for you? That was sort of the first taste that you had.
It was for me a great step, also because it's maybe important to know, because I did manage whilst I was in Qatar 2 teams. I was working for the FA, and then 2 seasons I've managed Al Ittihad, which is now Al Kharafa, and Al Sadd before I moved to United. So it was not completely new to me, but why I wanted the job was I wanted to make sure that all those tactical training sessions weren't transferred into team play, so that that everybody could see well that you blend the quick combination of one-touch football into that ability to players to be the man. So you get that level of unpredictability. There's a funny story through it, basically, because when I knew that the job was up for grabs, I wrote a letter and I shoved it on Sir Alex Ferguson's door. You know what I mean? Because I thought before they start looking outside, he might as well know I'm up for the job. And that's basically what I did. I says, Sir Alex says, I'm not sure whether I'm out of line here, but I know you're looking for a reserve team manager, but what if we can appoint somebody from within, And I explained the reasons why. So he called me in the office, and he's obviously had a giggle about it, that I did it that way with a letter. He says, but you're spot on, and you're going to have a go with it. And it was great because, like you said, we had PK, Johnny Evans, we had Fraser Campbell, Marcus Neuer, the German lad, Giuseppe Rossi. So we had a really good nucleus of player. And I took the responsibility to make sure that those players, because a lot of times those reserve team players, they feel a little bit left out, they feel a little bit like without direction. Where do I go next? Do I play? Do I not play? Can I go to the first team? Do I need to go on loan? But we created a really good environment with a really strong, own identity, to the Man United identity. Let's play, let's entertain, let's go for it, let's play attacking football. It was a great season. Actually, Ole played in a few games like that, and he scored a winner in I think the playoff final.
Yeah, well, Ole said himself as well, he sort of really thinks it's important to bring youth team players through the ranks. It's the likes of Angel Gomez as well, Teeth Chong. And do you think that's sort of really important to focus on as well in this current United squad, is bringing the younger players through rather than sort of letting them go away from United?
Well, I don't know anything else than how important it was always to Sir Alex Ferguson to keep this sort of bloodstream of young players coming through the ranks and in, because I always think it's important for the fans to see, homegrown players coming through. However, the landscape has changed so much at the very top level that there is hardly any time for those young players to bed in. You know what I mean? You have to be there, and you need to be instantly be able to perform, which is very hard at the top level because you need to perform on a Saturday, then on a Tuesday, then on a Saturday, then on a Wednesday, then on a Sunday, in different competitions. Premier League, then it's the Champions League, then it's the FA Cup. There's no holding back. That was one of the criteria, in my opinion, in the time that I was sort of the first team coach with United, that was such a big quality of that team at the time, the stability of those performances, you know, day in, day out, week in, week out. And that's not easy, but it's definitely important for bringing young players through, yeah.
And you obviously have coached a lot of younger players yourself. In that you're seeing, not just in United as well, what kind of young player would you have loved to coach that's sort of coming through the ranks at the moment?
On the world scheme, you say, I have to say I quite like Frankie de Jong from Ajax. Mm-hmm. I think he's a great prospect. He plays with no fear. He's that sort of midfield player that can create the extra already through midfield because he's not afraid to go past people in the middle. If that happens, then obviously the defence is always under pressure because they're losing one man. But I think he's a great prospect. Not a surprise for me that he's gone to Barcelona.
Obviously, you mentioned you went to the first team. That sort of movement from the reserves, you went to Denmark obviously for a couple of months, but then you moved to the first team, coached loads of great players. What was it like just being in that stage of United when they were so successful? You were with Phelan, Sir Alex Ferguson, you had Ronaldo there, you had the great players at United. What was it like for you?
Having. People used to ask me, you know, you must have the best job in the world. And I said, I do. I absolutely have the best job in the world because Sir Alex Ferguson came to a stage in his career. He had so much experience. He's already won so many things. And I think at those 6 years, he's basically reached the highest level what any manager can achieve in terms of, obviously, you know, that was the sort of third nucleus of team that he put together. Successful squad. He's obviously had his staff around him, but the biggest thing was he started to delegate a lot. To McPhelan, to myself, to Tony Strudwick for the strength and conditioning side. You know, we had Simon Wells on the video side of it, and I thought that was remarkable. You know, in many ways, he was always aware of what was going on. He understood what was going on in terms of what was happening on the training pitch, but he was never really getting involved, telling us, me and Mick, to say, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, and all this. There was a sort of a flow that ran through the whole of the staff, the whole of the squad. There was a maturity into the squad because you had loads of experienced players with Gary Neville, Rio Ferdinand, Edwin van der Sar, Vidic, Patrice Evra, Giggs, Scholes, you name them. And then you still had a good young nucleus of really young, energetic, but really, really top players. It was just fantastic to work with those every day.
And we've got a picture in our home where you're sort of talking to Cristiano Ronaldo. It's pouring it down with rain. You're sort of in his ear. He looks like he's walking off. Coaching a player of that capacity and like Ronaldo, who now is huge in football, what was that like? Because obviously he was just sort of beginning to become one of the world's best players then.
Yeah. I think I think the best decision Ronaldo's ever made was to come to Manchester United under the tutelage of, you know, Sir Alex Ferguson, you know, and amongst all those great players that had achieved already so much, but never lost the hunger. That's a massive aspect of it. The Giggs, Scholes, like I said, the players I mentioned before. And Ronaldo came in as this massive talent, you know, and he had bags of talent. The great thing with me and working with Ronaldo was that we had the ability to spend quite a lot of time just together. And I felt that the moment he was very, very receptive. There was only one thing in his mind, improving every day. I want to get better, with one thing in the back of his head, become the best player in the world. And eventually he understood what he needed to do to achieve that. You know, he needed to obviously become a better player. He needed to start scoring more goals, become more important for the team. He needed to start win titles with United. And he's achieved all that, you know. And Sir Alex Ferguson was the one that sort of, you know, managed his sort of personality as such. But, you know, they were all absolutely top professionals, all of them. I can't single anybody out, but Ronaldo was just so focused on what he wanted to achieve. And like I said, you know, he only needed half a word, but he would take everything on board that would help him to make him better.
So obviously Ronaldo massive player, another massive player, Messi. I've got to ask the question, Ronaldo or Messi?
You don't have to ask the question. It's a great question. And I tell you, it sums up how fortunate we are in this day and age that we've been able to grow up with absolutely two superstars of players. Obviously, I have to choose one of them. And obviously, I will choose, and I'll tell you and explain you for why. I want to choose Ronaldo. For why? Because once, obviously, I worked with him. I know him better than Messi. I've never worked with Messi. But what Ronaldo has achieved, Ronaldo has had this urge, this desire in him. And at one point, that has come into his head, has never left him. So he knew when he came to United, the next step was into Real Madrid and whatever the next step was, but obviously it's Juventus now. And to be able to achieve what he has achieved at Manchester United at a young age, winning Premier League titles, winning trophies, winning Champions League, then go on to Real Madrid, scoring just bag and bag of goals. And there were moments where sort of Messi was sort of with Barcelona, the best team, they were better. There was moments that Ronaldo could have said, this is it, I pack it in. And what did he do? He stepped it up. I'm not having it. I'm going to be better than that. I need to score more goals than this, which he did. And he won titles with Real Madrid. He won Champions League with Real Madrid, I think 3 in a row. Now he is with Juventus. He does exactly the same. So why is there the edge for me for Ronaldo? To be able to do that in 3 different leagues, difficult leagues, Premier League, Spanish League, and now Italian, is phenomenal. I hope that answers the question.
Well, I think it more than answers that question. So you were obviously there in the final 6 years that Sir Alex Ferguson was managing at United, one of the most successful periods of United's history. What was so unique about that team that you were obviously part of?
It was so mature. I mean, it was every season we looked at it and we looked in advance. It wasn't the case of if we're going to win something, it's what we're going to win something. Obviously the aims and targets were always the same: Premier League, Champions League, FA Cup, and then maybe the League Cup. Like I said before, we always used to discuss. So Alex and Phelan sit down and sort of brainstorm a little bit about the quality of our team and do we need anything else. And I always used to say to Sir Alex, listen, it's a very simple question. Who of our competitors, what players would they like to take from our team? And let's say that was Arsenal, Liverpool, City. And what players would we take from their team? As long as they would take more players from our team, then we were in a good situation. And it's the same with competing at the highest level, Champions League. What players would Barcelona want to steal from us, or Real Madrid or Bayern Munich? And that was a really good gauge. And we always managed to keep that quality really, really, really high. Like I said before, we had quality, we had plenty of players that made a difference and could make a difference. And we had a really good balance between experience and, you know, the youth and the energy that's needed to win trophies.
And you talked there about the players as well. What was sort of your impact on bringing players into United?
Well, obviously you discussed, and that was a sort of an ongoing discussion with the manager as such, that sort of some players came to the scene, you think, hey, I really like them, what do you think of him, and blah, blah, blah. But the one thing really that was maybe a little bit more of an influence was Robin van Persie, because through my sources I found out that it wasn't all, you know, great at Arsenal, and he made it very clear that if he would want to move anywhere in the Premier League, he only wanted to play for Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson. So given that, you know, that knowledge, you know what I mean, you start to think, you know, together, say, okay, would it be possible? Would it not be possible? How would we see it at that time? The policy or sort of strategy of the club and the Glazers were quite straightforward. You know, we want to bring players not older than 23 because we want to develop them and obviously make sure that we can use them for a long, long period of time, or maybe create market value. Robin was obviously late 20s, but he had what we felt to bring something to the team to give us another level. You know, especially just losing the league at the last day that year before, we really wanted to bounce back strong.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the current United squad. Ole has obviously been given the manager's job. You, as you mentioned, worked with Ole quite regularly when you were at United. What can Ole bring to United that's different?
I think for everybody to see what he's already sort of brought to the club itself. But the main thing is that Ole has been part of that successful period as such. So he understands, the history of the club, the DNA, the sort of players, that were part of it, the quality that's expected, to be successful. So there will be no surprises for him. Obviously he had a fantastic run when he came in. Because again, he's put a smile on everybody's face. He sort of changed the way in terms of, let's look forward, play forward, run forward, pass forward, that sort of scenario. They're just hitting a little bit of a more of a difficult patch, which was maybe, expected. But again, he should not be too worried about it and too surprised about it, because it's a long-term journey now. He's become from caretaker into full-time. The thing is, what he needs to do is to really, really closely look, okay, what are the reasons for those performances and what are the reasons for those results? And the answers lie obviously in the next few months in terms of recruitment, transfer, etc. And I think, I might expect that he has a good idea what he thinks is needed to get United back, challenging for Premier League titles. Yeah,
so obviously he came in. They had a brilliant streak. Now it's gone a little bit patchy. They've got some really difficult games coming up. Barcelona, Chelsea, Everton away, City, the big derby. What can fans sort of expect to see from this United squad that have got all these difficult games?
I felt that in the last few games it was a little bit like old habits don't die quickly. It was like, I don't know, there were certain elements in the game that reminded me of when Mourinho was still here, and he needs to take that, by the scruff of the neck and address it. And obviously he's very clear on what the United team should look like, and it needs to be based on an enormous work rate, a discipline, an aggression, and an attacking unpredictability. You have to throw things at them. I think the biggest thing that United need to develop on over the next months and over the next season is to be able to keep the ball better with purpose. I do think that we do resign and give, possession away a bit too easy. We let the other opposition have possession too easy. And that is some things you have to be, working on a training pitch and make sure you put it right.
And you've always said to me as well, change doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take time. Next season, a couple of seasons later, do you think United can be challenging for titles again?
Absolutely they can, but then there's quite a few things that need to happen. And I think we all know that. I just said it before. I mean, I've always asked the question, you can ask the question now. What players would Klopp, Pep Guardiola, what's his name again from Arsenal? Yeah, what players would they like to get from Manchester United? And which players would we take? And that is a bit of a gauge. And I think everybody is on the clear that we need a quality impulse. And we expect that support to become from the club. That's why that next period in the transfer window is going to be so important. But still then, it'll take time because, again, they need to get used completely to how Ole needs to play. Because he's already said, I want the hardest working team in the Premier League. So that means that you need certain players with certain energy levels and personalities to do that. So it's going to be an interesting run in to the season. Like you said before, there's going to be plenty of big games, but that's what every United fan in the past was looking forward to. We never sort of, we were looking forward to those games rather than thinking, ooh, and everybody's a little bit like apprehensive because of the late run. So luckily they've got more than a week to prepare for obviously the first big game against Barcelona. And again, one fantastic performance with a great result can again turn everything in a very positive way.
Well, let's just touch upon that Barcelona game. Can it be another PSG turnaround?
Well, hopefully we don't need a turnaround, but with Barcelona, and you look at Barcelona, and Barcelona is Messi. You take Messi out and the team is 50% less dangerous. Simple as that. That's how good the man is. So how do you stop Messi? We've tried it twice, failed. But it is that difficult. And on top of that, they're top of the league. They're going to win the league. Their bags of confidence. They've got obviously, so many good players up front. You got obviously Suarez that is obviously used to play against teams like Man United in his time at the Premier League. You know, you got Coutinho, and it's just a really good outfit with a really strong identity how they want to play. They want to keep possession. They want to suck the energy out of the teams. The really thing is to be really brave and bold. You have to throw something at them that they don't expect to do every week in the Spanish league. You need to make them defend. That's the main thing. If you need to keep turning them, you need to keep putting them under pressure. You need to get balls in the box. And if you do that, you know, and let's assume you would get one, you maybe would get two, great, you know what I mean? So then they need to try to get a really good result to take to the new camp.
Yeah, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but it was sort of just in the air when you were coaching and you had to play against Barcelona. I think it was in the semi-final. Was sort of the coaching that you did you have like a mat in the middle of the training session where one of the United players had to be in there, because if someone was off that mat, then that's the way Barcelona could get in through the middle, and you forced them to sort of play outside of them? Is that...
It was not such a map. What we did, we sort of created a big block in the middle. We sort of prepared in that final, especially the Wembley one, sort of for three scenarios. What are we going to do when Valdez has the goal kick? Are we going to drop off or stay high? We decided to stay high to make him kick, because you know we would definitely win the headers. The key was then to win the second ball and then play through the gaps if we could. If you remember that game, the first 15 minutes were absolutely down to the plan, perfectly. And we were very close at one point in actually nicking a goal with Chicharito almost getting through with Valdez, but that was a shame. Then when the ball was in open play, what was going to happen anyway? Then the key was, because when that sort of passing routine was going, it's very important not to get dragged all over the place. That's why we had the sort of map in the middle to making sure congested with a lot of players. The wide men come really in narrow, so let them play around. They can cross the ball for fun, doesn't matter. I mean, Vidic and Ferdinand and Van der Sar would have dealt with that. We knew they wouldn't cross the ball. They would have worked the ball in. But as soon as we would leave those gaps, they would sort of be able to find it through Xavi and what he did with Pedro with the goal. Obviously, we came back at halftime 1-1. And then also we knew how difficult the first 50 minutes in the second half was going to be, because that was a clear way of Barcelona suffocating teams in the first 50 minutes and then basically build up a score that other teams couldn't come back from. So that was the scenario where you have to defend really, really deep. And then because Messi was playing up front, he drops, are you letting players go with him, or are you staying zonal? So all those questions need to be answered. At the end of the day, it comes down at that level with top players that then are, no matter what plan you come up with, they have still the ability to create something and score a goal. And unfortunately, at that time, Barcelona was one of the best teams in the world.
And I always remember sort of having that question of, are we going to win today? Are we going to win today? I remember you picked me up from school and I'd be like, Dad, are we going to win today? Are we going to win tomorrow? And you'd always have sort of that aura of confidence of, we'll be all right. We've got a plan. We know what we're going to do. Did you sort of feel that going into most of the games that when you were...
Funny enough, yes, I did. And I also, to be fairly honest, going back to that Wembley final, I thought that what happened in that first half was basically sort of what I've envisioned. As long as we are staying in the game, what I was hoping for is to stay in the game with 20 minutes to go, because we had substitutions we could bring on, but far better than Barcelona could do. But if you could be able to stifle them and stop them from what they had on the pitch, there was not many things they could change. We had plenty of things that we could change. But then when you sort of, look at, obviously the confidence got sucked a little bit out of the team, so you need to get an early goal back. But that was the only one. But more than anything, I was very, very confident most of the time. So yeah, no problem. We're going to win, which was a great feeling to have.
Yeah. And obviously you've been away from United now since 2013. So quite a few years. You've had your fair share of different sort of jobs and different coaching roles. What have you learned sort of stepping away from such a big club as United and going to other teams? Well,
stepping away first was you moved away from a club that was just ran in such a fantastic way. And again, not the least with the greatest manager that has ever been. there was a stability and continuity, and that is now what I've learned with a lot of other teams not the case. The stability and continuity was there because of Sir Alex Ferguson as a manager. He has a clear vision about how, and the stability is with the people that were there with him for a long time. And then you can deal with the highs and the lows at times. I can always remember we never got really carried away, with winning a lot, but never mind if we did lose sometimes, it wasn't really a disaster. We just carried on and making sure that we were getting there where we wanted at the end. Moving away from that, then you basically, and in different countries, I've been in Russia, as you know, I've been in Israel and all that, and then you see that a lot of that short-sightedness, and a lot of decisions be made on emotions, and people have no time and space of time and patience basically to see things develop. Everything's need to happen overnight, and it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. So you look back to a club and you basically realise, how good the whole setup at United was at the time under Sir Alex Ferguson. And then obviously, for me, it's still an experience to being able to go to different countries and experience different cultures. As you know, I like traveling, so that was a good experience.
You like being 1,000 miles away from us, don't you? So.
Well, he says, I remember saying, why you have to take Australia? It's the job away. Well, it's not next door, but no, it is manageable. As you know, I do fly over when there are things with the Socceroos and the national team or the Olympic team, but other than that, I'm also have quite a bit of time to spend at home now. Yeah.
Well, another question that I was wondering whether you ever gave the hairdryer treatment to any of your other teams, whether you did it at United or any of the other teams.
Myself?
Yes.
Yeah, I can remember being a bit, not harsh, but sometimes players need to be told, especially if it's not a matter of, if it's not trying, that is the main thing. I mean, if people try and they try their best and everything, nobody should, you could always get praised for that. But if there is a scenario where you do know that they're not really trying the hardest for whatever reason, then people need to be told in a certain way.
I haven't got the hairdryer treatment ever.
No. I'm a good dad, am I?
Yeah, you are a good dad. So we've talked about sort of starting your career, getting into United. You've been out of United, you've had other sort of teams to manage. What has been your career highlight so far?
I think that those 6 years on the Sir Alex Ferguson with the first team has basically been, because every season there were highlights. We won leagues, we won different trophies, we were part of incredible games with last minute winners, extra time winners, that everybody remembers, and these are the moments that you treasure, the ability to work with such a nucleus of world-class players. I've always remembered that Sir Alex Ferguson told me, you always remember, Rene, as a first team coach, everything you do in training will manifest itself in the game, good and bad. So I felt a strong responsibility to make sure that things were good. We've expected for those players a world-class performance every time they stepped on the pitch, whether it was on a Saturday, Tuesday or a Sunday. So I felt every time we put training sessions on, myself, Mick Phelan, Eric Steele with the goalkeepers, Tony Strudwick, as a team, we knew it was world-class, you know what I mean? And the biggest compliment I think over the 6 years is that we've had, it says, we've never had any player coming up to us to say, well, this wasn't good enough, or what was this all about? They always enjoyed it. And you could see that enjoyment back into the games, into the performances. That was my biggest satisfaction, sitting next to Sir Alex Ferguson and seeing the things that we were, worked on in the training were just coming to fruition in the games.
Mm. And then I think the biggest question that everyone would like to know as well is, would you ever go back to the club? Would you ever go back to Manchester United?
Well, to watch. I've been back obviously to watch games. I think quite a few people have asked me that question, and it's obviously not for me to decide. I've done different things, this and that and the other, and it's one of those clubs, you know. It is by far more than just a club. It's become by far a bigger part of your life than just being the club you work for. And like I said, if that question would ever come to me, you know, it would obviously be very hard to say no.
Absolutely.
Can I leave it at that?
You can leave it at that. I can't push it anymore, otherwise you'll walk out the door. No, just sort of to finalise, is there anything that you sort of wish you have done or wish you could do? Have any aspirations that you still have now?
Oh yes. I think, like, you know, I'm the assistant to the Australian national team with the Socceroos, as they call them, and I would love to go to the World Cup. I would love to experience, you know, a World Cup. We've in the process. We've just had the Asia Cup, which unfortunately we got knocked out in the quarterfinals. But I think we would have definitely had a chance to progress through that. Graham, the national team coach, myself, we also do the Olyroos, the Olympic team, which we've just gone through the first qualifying phase. So if we can get through the second qualifying phase and go to the Olympics, that would be another, you know, ambition that I would love to fulfill. Yeah.
So this is obviously something that not very many people know, but I know it because I live with you. You love cooking soup and love making your own soups. He thinks himself as a little bit of a chef, don't you, Dad? So when you're home and you've got a lot of time on your hands, you like to make your own soup, don't you?
I do. I love to cook soups, and I think I'm actually very, very good at that. So I think I need to start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, his own soup.
But yeah, that is one of my things that I like doing.
Yeah, if anyone ever comes round, you'll get made a homemade soup by Rene Meulensteen. Which leads me on to the next question, is what's for tea?
What's for tea? I don't think you're even here, so whilst you're not there, Mum and I will eat fish.
Lovely. Well, thanks for this daddy-daughter bonding day.
No problem. More than welcome.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ryan Giggs, and you're watching Full Time Devils, the biggest, the best Man United fan channel in the world. Subscribe now.